being created for the first time, and you were with art.
Eamon Kelly somehow bridged that gap between the past and the present. He said once that he caught words in flight from Irish to English, and that is a marvellous phrase. They were like birds, and he could create by himself on a stage a whole world of folklore, the world of the imagination.
No matter how ordinary the locality in which a man grows up, there is always some distinguishing feature or landmark, the image of which stays in the mind. When I was small, this Skull stone seemed as tall as a skyscraper. It marks the grave of an ancient warrior, or maybe the last resting place of a local king. For there was a time in Ireland when kings were so plentiful you could hardly throw a stone without raising a lump on one of their heads. We could see this pillar stone from our own door, which is at Carrigean in the parish of Glenflesk near Killarney. And this stone, it marks the centre of the scene where the rising years of my youth were acted out. Behind it, this ridge of mountains like a ground row under the heavenly cyclorama. And these mountains, reading from the west, are the Mechlicoddy Reeks, which has the highest peak in Ireland, the Purple Mountain, Torc, Mangerton, Kippack, Stoompa, Croghan, Drumcarbon, the Paps, and Knocknabro. All these names forever ringing in my ears to remind me of home. This is the house where I grew up. I was born in Gallon near Guineawilla in the parish of Ramore, nearer to the Paps. I came here when I was 6 months old. I came in a sidecar driven by Danny Morris O'Connor. My father and our few belongings on one wing, and my mother and me sitting on the other wing. That's how I imagine it. And I was often told by the Murphys who saw me arrive that I had a fine head of flaxen curls. My father was a carpenter, and he made the bed and the chairs and the table and the dresser for the inside of this house. I remember the bed best of all. It had a high board all round it and a timber bottom, and it was filled up with straw, and there was a big feather tick on top of that. And my mother used to flounce it up, and she put me lying into it, and I'd be sinking down into it for an eternity, and I laughing up at my mother. They were happy days, sitting on my father's knee and he doing horsey. I can still smell the tobacco smoke from his waistcoat. My father made a small box for my mother. It was about a foot long and 9 inches high and 4 inches across, and it had a sliding top. And in that she kept a few pounds and the rent book and any other things belonging to herself. And the last letter that my uncle Eugene wrote. Eugene was my mother's favourite brother, and she killed herself crying after him. He died in the Great War in 1918 when I was 4 years old. And she'd read the letter for us and put us sitting around her. And she read it so often that I can remember pieces out of it. And one of them was this: I'm sitting here, he said, in this dugout with the guns rattling overhead. And a few yards away, a young German soldier is taking his long last sleep. Well, we were so concerned about the young German soldier that we were every bit as sorry after him as we were for our Uncle Eugene. As I grew older, this house became a rambling house like the tailor's cottage in Gougon. And when the day's work was over in the fields, the men used to crowd into our kitchen, and there was talk and debating and entertainment. People used to say that it was a cross between the Cork Opera House and Dáil Éireann. And the words and the talk that I heard there, I stored away and used them afterwards when it came to my turn to tell stories.
University of Seanchaí, Eamon Kelly.
How are ye, saints? One very wet day there was a woman going to town and she met another woman coming home a mile this side of the ford. Bridges weren't very widespread at that time in Ireland. And the woman going said to the woman coming, and we all know how quick a woman's mind can work when 'tis in top gear. The woman going said to the woman coming, she said, were you in town? What time is it? What price for eggs is the flood high? And the woman coming said, I was a 11:45, 1 and 9pence, I was at confession girl. I remember very well I was this way of a night. We were at a bit of a fuss that was given the night before a couple of the lads around here went to America. In the room I was, and Bruce O'Brien was sitting
with his back to the chimney piece, and he was shoveling in corn bread and drinking tea out of borrowed delf. And that was sitting near me on the forum was the codger Casey.
Oh, a fearful little cackler. And an awful argument arose between Bruce O'Brien and the codger Casey as to how long it was since the first Irishman set foot in America. Wasn't there a lot bothering him?
My great-grandfather's house was long and low and thatched. He married a widow woman whose house it was, for he had been evicted out of his own place in Van Ard. She was one of the Flemings, very good-looking people with curly heads. She had 3 sons, and when they grew up and saw 3 stepbrothers rising up after them, they went away to America. My great-grandfather, he divided the land, small and all as it was, between 2 of his sons, and to the other son he gave a trade, carpentry. That was my grandfather. He taught my father, and my father taught me. One of the farmer's sons built a house of his own, but 2 sons and their families lived on in the old homestead. All the cooking for the 2 families, it was done at this fireside. And I often heard it said that one family would wait until the other family had finished their dinner so as to use the same plates and the same cutlery. But they were happy, though, as happy as people living in a mansion. Up here, you had the rafter, you had the bacon all along, which was smoking up there, and all the woman of the house had to do was to reach up for a flitch of bacon and cut a piece off it and put it in the pot. And this fireplace was very common in those days. And it's a beam that's let into the wall from side to side. And this conical thing that you see up here, that was wicker work, and it was plastered over. And I remember when I went to visit my grandfather's house that I was wondering would the day ever come when I'd be tall enough just to reach the top of that. Down here at this side, you had the room. Sometimes that was used as the dairy. The other family lived up in this room. And overhead, there is another room with a ladder going up to it. I was over 7 years of age when I first came to this school. And here I am registered in the roll book under the name of Kelly Edmund, Roman Catholic from Carrigeen, whose father is a carpenter. What kept you so long, Edmund? I remember the school teacher saying to me, and the other boys, Jerry Mack and Jordanels and Condinine, they were ready to burst out laughing when they heard the teacher calling me Edmund. For at home I was called Ned, young Ned, for my father's name was also Ned. Well, I said the way it was, we were waiting every day until the Tan War would be over. Well, one war isn't over, but another war begins, and the Civil War was raging now. The first Free State soldier I ever saw, I saw him inside in this school, and it was the 2nd of November 1922. And when we were out to play that day, we saw 2 Republican soldiers, and they were walking along the road outside. They were Michael O'Sullivan and Denny Connor. And I can see them as plain as if it was yesterday, and the way they were dressed and the bandoliers around them. And we were very jealous of the big boys out of 5th and 6th class, because they were running along by the 2 Republican soldiers, and they were chatting to them, and they were putting their hands on the rifles. The bell went, and we came into school, and about an hour afterwards there was a great commotion. And what happened was, according to the account given by Dorothy McArdle in the Tragedies of Kerry, when the 2 Republican soldiers, when they got over there as far as the top of the hill, they looked down into Cnocon's village, and there was a troop of about 40 Free Staters down there, and they were under the command of Captain Tiny Lyons. They were rounding up Republicans, and these 2 men did not want to be rounded up, so they opened fire on the Free State troops, and they kept them at bay, for a very long time. Finally, 6 Free State soldiers got around at the back of them, and they were hemmed in, and they had to fight for it. And even though that they were wounded, Denny O'Connor, he got away through Scott's Fields below the road here and made a dash for freedom. And Michael O'Sullivan, he was wounded too. He got into Jeremiah O'Leary's house, which is second next door to the school. And it was there in the kitchen that the Free State soldiers found him. And though he was wounded and he couldn't use his gun, you know, they dragged him outside the door and they shot him dead. But of course, there were atrocities committed on both sides. When news came to the school that Michael O'Sullivan was shot, well, the principal teacher, Mrs. O'Leary, and her daughter, who was the assistant teacher, who was afterwards Mrs. Spillane, they were very upset. And when we saw the anguish in their faces, we didn't know what to do. And the big girls out of 5th and 6th class, they were weeping openly. And it was then I saw the Free State soldier, and he came inside the door, and he had a white coat, and he said that he was a doctor. The coat was open in front, and we could see his uniform. And he spoke to the teachers, and he tried to calm them down and to say that everything would be all right, and that the soldiers would be going away soon. When the soldiers pulled away, and everything was quiet, we were allowed to go home early. But there was no fighting on the road going home that evening between the boys, because every other evening, the sons of those whose fathers were Republicans would be fighting with the sons of those whose fathers were Free State soldiers. They'd be throwing stones at them. There was no fighting that evening because the real thing had happened to us very near the school, and it frightened the wits out of us. Sinead and Scale, Dírach mar a hála sé, fadó, istíg sa scoil seo. A temporary Celtic cross first marked the spot near where Michael O'Sullivan died, and I remember it had his photograph in a glass panel in the center of the cross.
When will you discover the stain-removing power of Vanish Liquid? Now you can with this trial pack for just 29p.
The Nokia 5110 is the first mobile phone with covers you can change yourself in seconds. For freedom of expression, the Nokia 5110 with Nokia Express-On covers. Nokia, connecting people.
Before you color your hair, stop and think. What if you could protect your hair as you color? Excellence Cream from L'Oreal. It doesn't drip and really covers gray. What I love is the color, the healthy feeling. Does your hair color do all that?
Excellence Cream, the creme de la creme of hair color.
L'Oreal, because I'm worth it.
I tried to warn him.
Glad you're here.
Do join me for a drink. It's so nice when company drops in unexpected. Say, don't I know escaping the taste.
Can love endure? Sure. That's why L'Oreal created new Color Endure Stay-On Mascara. It doesn't smudge. It doesn't flake.
Of course. It's L'Oreal.
But the real surprise is that a mascara that gives beautiful lashes for up to 24 hours just washes off with soap and water. No more smudging or flaking.
And no more compromising.
New L'Oreal Color Endure Stay-On Mascara.
Because I'm worth it.
For a mere £4.99, you can enjoy the National Symphony Orchestra in your own home with 2 new CDs on the Naxos label. Bruckner's Second Symphony, conducted by George Tintner, and Rachmaninoff's Third with Alexander Anisimov, both called exceptional records by the toughest of critics. Available from all good record shops, even by your fireside. RTE supports the arts.
What the bloody hell are you doing here?
Porrick says you won't come up to the Majestic. Why don't you come to the hotel tonight for dinner?
You don't understand anything, do you? You haven't understood anything since you came here. I'm not going into that building to sit at table with the British. And I won't have my own countrymen slaving to feed my belly when they have nothing to put on their own. British blackguard. We'll find a glass in the kitchen. Do you think you have achieved anything? He's past saving. They all are. And the girl? Do you think she needs a knight in shining armor? Well, I suppose you're not the first Englishman to suffer that illusion in this country. A beautiful woman seems such a solid thing. Solid as granite. But really, she's no more than a flaring match, a burst of flame, darkness before and after. You should go now before it's too late.
You're right. I must get back.
Leave. Leave Ireland. That's my prescription. Leave Kilnalock. There's no place now for a British gentleman like you.
I have to stay. At least for the ball.
So that's the reason now, is it?
My father built a workshop at the side of the house where he made common carts for the farming community, complete with rail for drawing turf, a butt for drawing manure, and guards with a seat across for going to mass. As well, he built and repaired houses, and I remember he was repairing a house for the doctor in Ramore, and he had the sash made, and he was ready to put in the glass, and he was painting the rivet, and he was mixing the putty. And the doctor walked by, and he said, "Ha-ha, Kelly," he said, "putty and paint covers all your mistakes." "That's right," says my father, "and the spade and the shovel covers all yours." As well, he was a wheelwright. And I think a man who can make a wheel, it's such an intricate affair, he could nearly make a watch. The material for the wheel, the stock, which is here at the centre, and the spokes, they were of oak, that was of elm, and then the 6 fellows to make the rim, we got them roughly sawn from Lord Kinmare's sawmill. And the first thing that was prepared was the stock. And there were lines going around the centre for the position of the spokes. And then the carpenter marked out the mortices, and with the auger he bored straight down through. The mortise for spoke number 1 had to be directly over number 6, and the same thing for number 3 and for number 9. Because if they weren't plumb, when you put the wheel together afterwards and put it under the cart, you had a drunken wheel. I worked at the bench with my father until after a spell of night classes
I won a scholarship and I was trained as a woodwork teacher. I was fortunate enough to get a job in my native county. And my first assignment was as itinerant teacher with 6 weeks courses in woodwork here and there in different parishes. It was during the war years, and Austin Clarke had a poetry program on the radio, poetry competition. And people were urged to write in verse about themselves and about their work. And my mother's cousins, the Scannells, they were minor poets. And to see if I brought any of it with me, I decided I'd have a go. So I did. I didn't win, but like the crossbreed at the dog show, I was highly commended. In village halls, mostly unkept, where jiggy youth and jazzy maid in weekly revels reel, I've taught men older than myself woodcraft and the art of wielding sharp steel. Here, far from bombing aircraft and bursting shell, they dig deep trenches in wood or camouflage a loose joint with a knotty excuse. They're happy, though, expressing themselves in rippling wood as artists do in stone and clay. That dark man with the thin white hands wastes the sunny hours inside the village bank. Beside him there, in from the fields, a bony lad. He still smells of horse and cow and new-mown hay. He's the publican, the red-faced man. He'll make his wife a press or a shelf to show his whiskey on. And there's the master. Let him use his Euclid now. I have set him an angular task. And here am I, a small tin god among these men, because I give and look for aught from them. They listen to my tales of pines and blood-red woods from sun-scorched climes, or watch me draw an oak leaf with fruit, the acorn carrying in its womb a baby king. The memory claims and holds these things. The fingers still remain. To eardrums cling the echoing of screaming wood before the lusty plain. We're in Listowel. Overhead is the Maid of Erin, a Christian cousin of the goddess Dana. Listowel is a distinctive town, a scholarly place. A year in Listowel is as good as 3 at a university. I taught in the tech here for a while, so that years on, I often run into a past pupil in the street.
Threw a duster at me, and the chalk on my navy blue suit, and I said, my mother will kill you. We met another night up over the barley corn, where you had the reception.
In New York.
After the play. You were out for another, not your own play this time.
It was a Branfield play called Philadelphia Here I Come.
That's it. And the reception afterwards was upstairs in the barley corn.
I know.
And a policeman, a good friend of mine, Captain Pierce Maher, played the bagpipes.
Oh, I see. I remember that, yes.
I don't know how many pubs there are in Listowel, but for theatrical people passing through, there's one that's always a definite port of call, John B.'s, where the company is always convivial. My lifelong friend, Brian McMahon, novelist, playwright, famed short story writer and balladeer. And the man himself, John B. Keane, novelist, poet, columnist, and above all, famous playwright.
Hold on now, there, yes. I get a word in edgeways here. Hold on now.
Oh, you're on the ball now, Brian.
I'm on the ball now. He came up the street with Anthony Lennon, who was the headmaster at that time.
Yes.
You see, and I looked across the street from my bookshop at him, and I said, you know what? He has an interesting face. And it's half Himalayan and half 12 pins of Connemara. Understand? So I said, I must get after that for the fast. So he came into the shop, to the bookshop. Now, you said, was he a